On this episode, we travel to New Zealand. We look at pedestrian advocacy in New Zealand. A pedestrian and bicycle path is going to be added to the Auckland Harbour Bridge. We learn about a new tool to select the best type of pedestrian crossing. We drop in on the Auckland Marathon. Finally, we hike along the coast-to-coast walkway in Auckland. Stay tuned.
We're in Nelson, New Zealand, talking with Andy Smith. What organization are you with?
I'm the president of Living Streets Aotearoa, which is the Maori word for New Zealand.
And what does your organization do?
We're the pedestrian advocacy group down here in New Zealand. Like America Walks, like the Automobile Association represents cars, we represent the pedestrians and walkers, mainly the urban pedestrians. We've got other organisations representing recreational walkers as well.
What's been going on here this week in Nelson?
This is the To Walk and Cycle conference. We tried to have separate conferences for a while, but the funding ran out, so we're doing it together with the cyclists. The Cycle Advocates Network are the other organisation that are helping run this, and it's also funded by sponsors and the New Zealand Transport Agency, which is the delivery arm for the government funds.
What's been going on at this conference? What happens at a conference like this?
It's been interesting. There's just been a coronial report, which is there have been a lot of cyclist deaths recently, and there's been a report back on why that's happening. Speeds have come into it, lack of shoulders on roads, and bad attitude really from all of us when we get in our car. This black curtain drops in front of our eyes and we think we own the road. That's what happens in New Zealand. There's also this law change behind us. We're the only country in the world that I know of that doesn't allow pedestrians to walk in front of the pedestrian going straight through. So turning cars should give way to pedestrians as they do in your country and Canada, but it doesn't happen in our country.
So it's up to the pedestrian then to stay out of the way of the turning car.
We're fair game, yeah. In fact, even if you're standing in the middle of the road, halfway through your crossing point, a car can still turn in front of you.
So is that who has to change that law? Is that a federal law, or where does that happen?
We've only got one layer of government, so it's right up there in the Parliament, and it just needs to be done. Of course, you can't really change the law without changing the attitude, so we're going to talk about it for a very long time, because like lower speeds around residential areas, it's all about traffic calming, but rather than whacking up a sign saying do 30k. Yeah.
So if you expect people to drive 30k on a road, it's going to be a different looking road than a 60k road or an 80k road?
Yeah, it's got like the road diets. I can't remember the name of the American advocate, Dan Burden. Dan Burden, yeah. Road diets are necessary if you want people to slow down. Self-explaining roads have been talking about here where there's just a tree in the middle of the road rather than a big wide road which gives the eyesight all the way. There's an obstacle and people will slow down from the 50 kilometre limit, which is usually in residential areas, down to something more sensible that explains the road better. Yeah.
What difference does lower speeds make to pedestrians? Why is that so important?
Yes, it's all about the head snapping. 30k, you've got a less chance of being killed. Above 30 kilometres an hour, there's a higher risk of being killed. So you will get damaged below 30k, but you won't be rolling onto the bonnet and your spine won't snap, and instant death is caused.
Now, what have you been doing in conjunction with the various international pedestrian groups?
Yeah, I was just in Sydney at Walk 21. I just got this lovely little walking man here from Scott at America Walks, and there at the International Federation of Pedestrians, we all agreed, there's 7 organisations in the room and 7 on the Skype call, agreed to concentrate on crossings throughout the whole globe. So that will be interpreted by their own countries, but in New Zealand, like Living Streets UK, we'll be concentrating on the wait time when you press a controlled crossing button for the green man to come up and the amount of time you get. So less wait time, longer crossing times.
And This is an issue that's a problem, here in New Zealand and elsewhere?
Yeah, it is, especially in smaller towns where it's all about freight going through the streets, and the traffic engineers haven't cottoned on to the idea that it's people walking and spend money on the streets. Sticky streets is what Brent Todderan's been telling us that should happen, rather than streets or roads that are corridors for traffic. They should be streets with living, active edges. And we need to slow traffic down. And there's places for traffic, motorways or freeways as you call them. But once you get people involved, like the home zones, the Verneufs in Holland, I think that small areas where people live can be slowed down. In the suburbs of the 60s and 70s, there's the cul-de-sacs. They can be slowed down. If it's a grid system, especially if from the 1800s, they were very small roads anyway, so they're quite amenable to being slowed down to 30k just through self-explaining parts. Yeah.
What's your goal? If I was to come back to New Zealand a decade from now, what would you like to have accomplished?
I would like to see 30 km an hour in residential suburb areas, which then go back up to a normal, travelling speed in the arterials. I would like to see more build-outs from roads, from crossing points, more tables at intersections which slow traffic down, a lot more self-explaining roads, and an attitude where the road is shared and might is not only power. Like I have a tin box around me, everyone shall give way. There should be a place for humans to exist, not a place for cars to travel through.
We're talking with Bevan Woodward. What organisation are you with?
We're called the Auckland Harbour Bridge Pathway Trust, otherwise known as SkyPath.
And what does your organisation do?
Okay, well, we've been working for quite a few years to get walking and cycling access across the Auckland Harbour Bridge.
What's the significance of the Auckland Harbour Bridge?
Well, Auckland's our biggest city in New Zealand. We have a population of about 1.4 million people, and we have one big bridge which separates our city. It's a little bit like, say, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And this bridge, which was built way back in 1959, never catered for walking and cycling. And it's been like that to this day, and we believe that must change.
How long has this effort been going on? Has it been? Was there any discussion of this when they were originally building the bridge?
Yeah, sure. The original plans provided for walking and cycling, but they decided that it was getting too expensive and they had to cut costs. So, unfortunately, they decided to chop out the walking and cycling.
So, how difficult is it to add walking and cycling to an existing bridge like that?
Yeah, it's proven to be a difficult process. The engineers have always told us that the loading on the bridge would be too great, that you can't add, can you believe, a pathway. And the transport people have told us that it would be too expensive to add such a pathway. It just wouldn't be worth it. So we've had to meet these two key challenges, the engineering and the funding, to show them how it could be done.
So did you have to hire your own engineers then to figure it out?
Well, we've been very lucky. We've had a lot of assistance by professionals, by engineers who really want to see walking and cycling across our harbour bridge, and they've been prepared to work for nothing. And likewise, many supporters, many professionals have worked for nothing on this project.
And were they able to figure out, can you add walking without the bridge collapsing?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, they could work out how to do it. So it all came down to the engineers being concerned about the most extreme situation where you have illegally overweight trucks. You have a very hot day which causes stress in the steel, where you have crush loading of people, hundreds of people all crush loaded at the same place, that an illegally overweight truck crashes over the side of the bridge and hangs on the very edge. all these things have to happen at the same time in the same place, and then you might have risk of some kind of failure in the bridge. Even though the probability of this happening is so remote, we had to show how we could avoid that happening. And the way we've done it is, well, one, we've used lightweight construction material. We're building a composite structure. You may be familiar with the Oracle America's Cup catamaran, lightweight, incredibly strong materials. We're using the same people, the Oracle factory, just north of Auckland. And secondly, we will have to manage the number of people allowed on the pathway at any one time. So to avoid this idea that we'll get crowd loading at one particular place. So we will have to have, let's say, no more, and this hasn't been finalised, but we've got good ballpark figures, no more than 2,000 people on the bridge at any one time. And that's fine, because we think from health and safety, we don't want any more than that up there anyway at that time. So it's not a problem, and it will just be a good management technique which will make the engineers happy.
And on the finance side, how are you able to tackle that side of it?
Yeah, sure. Another problem, because the New Zealand government underfunds walking and cycling. There's only a small budget. There just isn't enough money for a project of this magnitude. It's a 1 kilometre long pathway. It's got observation decks. It's built to a high standard. It's 4 metres wide. I guess that's a bit over 12 feet. There just isn't sufficient budget. So we, for better or worse, are going to charge a fare to use Skypath. For most people it'll be very easy. If you're an Aucklander, you've already got a transport card which you just swipe whenever you hop on a bus or a ferry or a train. So that same card, you'll just swipe it and the arms will open and through you go. And then tourists can pay by cash or other means, texting and so forth. So through that toll we will pay for the construction and operation of Skypath.
Now, who's going to be using it? Is it going to be tourists out for a view? Is it going to be the folks living on the north side? Who's your customer?
Yeah, sure. We see 3 distinct customer groups. Certainly tourists will be a really important part of that mix. It seems that whatever city in the world you go to, whether it be San Francisco or Sydney, you want to go over the Harbour Bridge. But if you're in Paris, you want to go up the Eiffel Tower. If you're in London, you want to go to the Millennium Eye. You want to go to the high point. You want to take in the city and feel like you're really experiencing it. So, yep, we think tourism will be really popular. You know, the price tourists pay will still be a very reasonable price. Secondly, there's obviously the commuters. So we think there'll be 1,000 to 2,000 commuters a day cycling across the Harbour Bridge. But the biggest group will be Aucklanders who want to get out and enjoy their own city. So they are recreational users. So we've got 3 distinct user groups: tourists, recreational users, and commuters.
Once you have the path on the bridge, what's the infrastructure like on the ground on each end?
Yeah.
Are they going to have to do something to hook it up to the existing trail network, or what's going on there?
Yeah, well, that's a really exciting part of this project, and it's actually part of the reason why we actually focus on this project, and that is the authorities are now working on some really nice, some high quality walking and cycling paths to connect at both ends, and what we're seeing is some really good work now to fan out to the north and to the south, and it's happening now. We've seen just in the last 2 months new cycling infrastructure being opened. Next month we expect to see a wonderful new promenade, a waterfront promenade, which will just be beautiful, and it will link the Auckland CBD right round to where the bridge is. This never existed, of course, so it's high quality, and it'll interface really well really well with SkyPath. And then on the northern side, there's fantastic plans to hook right through to the next major suburbs. So what we call Takapuna on the North Shore, a little bit like Sausalito in San Francisco, really high quality paths. And from there, there's even more plans. So we're really excited because SkyPath wasn't only about fixing the most critical gap in the network, but it was about being the catalyst for a whole lot more other projects, and that is actually happening.
So if things go well,
Yeah.
when could I come to Auckland
Yeah.
and walk
Yeah.
across?
Okay, 2016, hopefully early 2016, but maybe mid 2016. We're tracking well. I've been working on this project now for about 10 years, and I'm finally now feeling pretty optimistic that we can start talking about an opening date in early to mid 2016.
We're talking with Stacey Rendell. Who do you work for?
Abley Transportation Consultants in Christchurch, New Zealand.
And what do they do?
We do a range of different transport programs, I guess, based around active transport quite a lot, and a large amount of research. And we also have a GIS arm that is called Interpret, and they focus on a lot of geospatial stuff that was originally around transport, but now is diversified into quite a different range of things.
You did a study on crosswalks. What was that all about?
Yeah, so we were working for Austroads, which is an Australia and New Zealand association of road controlling authorities. So they provide guidance and set legislation about how roads and crossings and things like that will work. And our goal was to develop a tool that could be used in both countries in all the different jurisdictions that would help planners and designers select the best kind of pedestrian crossing for a given road. So given the pedestrian volumes, vehicle volumes, geometry, and the location of the crossing, the tool goes through all the different options and assesses pedestrian level of service, delays to vehicles and pedestrians, safety, and calculates the economic BCR for the project.
How many different types of crossing possibilities are there?
I think it's about 14 all up. So you've got various aids, so there's curb extensions, platforms, and median refuges, and combinations of those, zebras and combinations with crossing aids as well, and then signals with some combinations of crossing aids.
How did you do the research? I mean, what sort of data did you collect? And
Yeah, so the level of service research, well, that was the gap where we had to fill in with the most research. And there was an existing database in New Zealand that had been developed by asking pedestrians how they felt, how walkable they found various walking along streets and crossing different road segments. And then they recorded a whole bunch of environmental and operational factors about all these different crossings and paths. Yeah. And so we analysed that, but it didn't really have a huge amount of information that was applicable to new crossings. So some of the factors were things like graffiti and pavement condition, while a new crossing would have good pavement condition, wouldn't have graffiti and litter and things like that. So to fill in those gaps, we conducted a series of focus groups in a few cities around New Zealand that really isolated those new build factors and how that related to pedestrian walkability. So the net result of all that walkability is we do a level of service A to F for all the different kinds of crossing, and that is sensitive to vehicle volumes, road width, and I can't remember all the variables right now, but a bunch of different variables that can exist at the different kinds of crossing. And obviously your aids, so median refuge and your curb extensions will change those, and so will zebras and signals compared to your uncontrolled facility.
how did people's perceptions differ from what your other types of data tell you?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things was that in terms of safety, a raised platform is one of the most safe interventions you can put in as a pedestrian aid, but it's actually one of the least walkable in terms of what pedestrians find. It does improve walkability, how friendly they find it, but not as much, or not very much. It's probably the least of all the different crossing aids that there are, but in terms of safety, it's one of the greatest. So that was quite an interesting finding.
Now, how's this going to get put to use now that
Yeah, so the tool has been programmed up to work in a web page. So it's going to be hosted on the Austroads website, and practitioners from New Zealand and Australia can log into that, or they might be able to use it without logging in, I'm not sure, sorry. Can use that tool and they enter all the site information and click a few buttons and out pop the results. And it gives them the ability to tweak various things, test different cost scenarios and things like that, and see how the outcomes change.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.
What have you got? Oh, cool. Awesome.
Last year, unfortunately. I love Auckland and
David Burrell from Australia and Verity Blythe. Good on you, Verity. Well done. Sarah Thompson.
We are not too far away, and I know how much training's been going into this event.
enjoyed it.